Hello, friends. I am super duper excited to have Tatiana with us today, who I actually was just with just a couple weeks ago in Provence with my mother. And she's going to speak about her retreats that she curates. And we're going to start off with Darcy reading her bio. Darcy?
Hello, all. I am so pleased to introduce Tatiana Chernyshova. She is a cellist, walking mentor, and retreat leader based in Provence, France. Tatiana creates transformative experiences for women navigating transition, healing, and self-discovery, weaving together sound journeys, sacred pilgrimage, and the ancient landscapes of the south of France. Through her signature walking mentorship retreats and cello sound journeys, Tatiana walks alongside women through the moments that ask everything of us: the crossroads, the silences, the reckonings. Her work explores the deep connection between voice, authenticity, and the sacred feminine, inviting women to reclaim parts of themselves that have been forgotten, silenced, or left behind. A graduate of the Royal Academy of Music and an EMCC accredited coach, she brings together the rigor of professional musicianship and the intuitive wisdom of someone who has walked her own path of transformation. Her retreats draw pilgrims to the grotto of Mary Magdalene at Saint-Baume, a site of ancient feminine mystery, as well as into the wild hills and lavender fields of Provence. Tatiana's mission is simple and profound: to help women find and embody their authentic voice. Not only the physical voice of speaking and singing, but the deeper voice of a life lived in true alignment. And I couldn't be more honored to be part of this conversation. So, hand it back to you, Michelle.
Yay. All right. Well, this is definitely unique because not everyone that comes on that talks about the retreats, I've actually just been on one, even though that would be so awesome. Um, but why don't we just start off, Tatiana, and speaking about you and like what got you into um, creating these beautiful adventures for people and specifically I really want to highlight the sound work that you do that's so healing and so beautiful and speaks so much to who you are.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm very pleased to be here. We've been postponing the recording of this podcast for months, and I'm very glad that the timing worked out in our favor, that actually it happens after you've come and experienced one of my retreats yourself. And
Yes.
you brought somebody really dear with you. You mentioned that you came together with your mother, and it's been an absolute pleasure to host you both and to create something so unique just for you two. So this actually, I think, would be a perfect example that will help me to answer your question. You know, it brings me so much joy to create these itineraries for people that go beyond the ordinary travel. You know, it all starts with an initial interview where I ask, um,
Mhm.
what is a person looking for? You know, why they want to travel in first place. And I am lucky enough to be living in Provence, which is a beautiful land, a beautiful country, and has so much to offer. So depending on what the person is seeking in terms of what are the skills they want to learn, what are the experiences they want to try, but also what internal journeys they are currently going through. Once I gather all of this information, I see it as a very creative person. And coming from a musical background, it also very much looks like a musical composition where I have all of these different factors that I need to count in. And then I need to thread them all together in this sort of beautiful piece of music, depending on the person that I work with. And for me, this is the biggest joy, really, how I can create the experience first in my head and replay it, and then bring a person or people along with me on this journey and actually make it real and share all of these experiences. So, that for me is a beautiful way for transformation. And seeing the before and after and receiving the feedback from the guests is always so, so positive.
Could you share a little bit, Tatiana, about how you got into this, like, just gorgeous combination of offerings, really? So you have this experience in music. It sounds like you've had personal experience in travel. You can definitely correct me if I'm wrong. And then really curating these experiences for others. How did that happen?
So my personal and professional way started in music. I embarked on a professional musician's journey at a very early age. At the age of 5, I was already singing and performing on stage professionally.
Mm.
And then at the age of 13, I chose the cello to be my major. So I was born in Moscow, so I received very academic, rigorous training as a musician. Hence started very young. And then it was music that brought me traveling in first place. As a musician, I used to travel the world, go to music festivals, meet people from all sorts of different backgrounds and cultures, and create connections with these people using musical language. So by the age of 30, I was already living in London, playing professionally with orchestras and basically doing this full time. So it all started through the path of becoming a professional musician and meeting people along the way and experiencing these different cultures myself. And then I went through my own sort of personal and identity crisis and a big change. These were the years where I, first of all, became a mother. And this is a big transition for every woman when you embrace a completely different role and you have to reinvent yourself, both in personally and professionally. And just when I was ready to go back performing on stage, the pandemic happened. And like many people all over the world, I was also facing some important questions and had to make some choices in order to figure out what to do next. And this is where coaching and mentoring came into my life. I received my coaching accreditation, and when we were coming out of the pandemic, I already was running my own coaching practice. I really discovered a new passion for, working with people. And I think because coaching has been so helpful for me, I then wanted to share the love with others. And so the more I went into mentoring and coaching and creating this transformational experiences with people, music has always been on the background. So the work that I do now is the combination of the two. So when I create these experiences for people using the landscapes of Provence where I live, I use all of my coaching and mentoring skills, but also a lot of creativity that comes from my musical side. And when it comes to traveling and retreats, this is something that we have in common with Michelle. This is, in fact, how we both met.
Mm.
We embarked on a journey with a company called Walking Mentorship. And these guys, they specialize in taking people on walks that are not just walks in beautiful places, but they themselves are transformational walks. So, in the beginning of the journey, you come in with either a question or an issue that you want to solve. And by the end of the walk, by literally helping yourself think with each step, you are getting a little bit more clarity on what it is you're looking for. So these walks and the landscapes, they become a scenery for change.
Mm.
So in the retreats that I create, I have a really big palette of colors, or if you like, a big array of tools that I can use to create something completely unique. So when I work with people, it's always a mixture of, a little bit of walking in nature, a little bit of deep conversation, and a lot of sound and music at the background. So all of these now become my tools to help people discover connection with themselves and also connection with the world around them.
Mm.
So that just, again, now I think I arrived at this stage of my life where I can blend all of my life experience and all of my professional experience in order to cater and create these experiences for others.
Mhm.
Was Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm curious how music and sound has been part of your transformative journey since it's shifted so much what you were sharing about in childhood and the discipline and devotion required to be so consistent and what you said rigorous in your training, and now being in a state where you are really creatively sharing it with people unscripted. Is that a metaphor for how your life has changed also from, one type of living to another?
Yes, absolutely. And to give you an example, that was exactly the conversation I had last evening. I was invited to deliver a workshop for a group of women. There were 10 women in the room, and it was advertised as a cello sound healing. And I had to then present myself and say that the sessions that I do are not how people normally would not what they would normally expect from a sound healing session. So it doesn't require lying on the floor with beautiful eye masks and just relaxing to the sound. It is very much a session that I lead, sharing my own story, how, I spent so many years and literally thousands of hours practicing my instrument in order to play the right notes, written by composers, playing them right, playing them in tune, delivering a performance at a high level. So everything was very structured, very organized, and musicians training is very similar to what athletes go through. You really have to get it right every single time, which also brings a lot of anxiety and a lot of performance anxiety. So it's always this element of sort of not being good enough and striving for perfection. And so what happened in my case is when I stepped away from performing full time and actually got myself into a very different industry of coaching, wellness, well-being, sometimes this is what it takes. You need to step away from what you're doing to get a completely different perspective. And so when I started to introduce sound and work with sound back into my work with clients, I looked not just at music, but the power of sound, the transformative and healing properties of sound. So I was starting to work with the essence. And this is where I started collaborating with sound therapists. I started playing with the gong and the singing bowls and learning about the frequencies. So, something that I wasn't taught in the music school. So, I literally had to learn another musical language. And that freed me up so much that I started taking a very different approach to sound. So when I host my sessions now, I always start with a piece of music that everybody recognizes, maybe a music by Bach or a classical composer. But I would always like to finish with a completely free improvisation. And one of the women in the group yesterday, she asked me in the end, she's like, "Oh, but what was this music? I never heard it." And I had to share that that music is absolutely unique because this is when I enter, that's sort of what people call a state of flow, when it is completely intuitive. And sometimes it feels like the sound is moving through me. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to end up playing. And it's different every time, depending on the group that are present in the room, depending on the time of the day or the energies or the conversations we were having before. But what it does, it always brings, it almost, harmonizes the room and it changes the energy in the room almost immediately. And this is why more and more I am pulled towards working with sound because sound goes beyond our analytical mind. And sometimes you do use it as a universal language. It speaks to you directly, and sometimes it doesn't even need to be put into language, into words. But it can have really profound effects and can change the state of mind very quickly. So that was a very long answer to your question.
It's just gorgeous. It really speaks to part of your bio that mentioned the sacred feminine. What you just shared really is encapsulates part of that energy, at least in my experience. It's like it's so indescribable and it's also very palpable. Um,
Mm.
so thank you for elaborating more about how your life has impacted what you're sharing now. It's quite the quite the transformation. And I imagine that motherhood was a whole nother iteration of that, like you shared.
Mm.
I know Michelle has questions too. I will pass the baton back, but I've got more later.
Mhm. Um, yes, thank you. There's just so much that we can speak to, Tatiana. Um, I think what might be fun for the listeners is to maybe speak to like um, who you are wanting to create retreats for, um, any upcoming retreats you want to speak about. And then, of course, you and I can speak about the recent one that you had curated for my mom and I too. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I found myself lately working almost exclusively with women, which honestly wasn't even my choice. It just happened so. But I believe that you can only attract people who who sort of can relate to what you are going through. And as Darcy mentioned, I've been going through so much transformation myself that it's almost not surprising that women who are seeking for that change or seeking to discover this part of themselves and connect with them, they somehow would, find me on their radars and will feel, yeah, will feel like they would want to walk with me or work with me in any of these capacities, and this is why I offer so many different modalities and so many ways that women can come and work with me, starting from individual mentoring sessions, and some of them take place on Zoom very conventionally, but some of them actually take place during walking. And it's a surprising but very effective method. So you don't actually have to physically walk side by side. You can do it remotely. You just need good signal and good connection and a pair of shoes, and you can really walk from anywhere. But when you combine the combination of walking in nature and coaching, is one of my favorite ones. As I mentioned before, you really help you think with your feet, and then you walk to the same speed of your thoughts, and you get closer to the answer literally step by step. And there's just so much you can do when you use nature as a lever. So this is another way of working with people that I love. And another type of sessions is directly tailored to help women use their voices, physically and metaphorically. I've also trained in a modality that's called yoga of voice or voice yoga. There are different ways of calling it. Some of it also called yoga of sound. So through very practical tools and exercises like humming and chanting, so we're not talking vocal techniques. We're literally talking about activating our voices and using the sound and the properties of sound to, um, to send the vibrations inwards. To use our bodies as instruments. And this has become a very, very powerful tool of, women who probably are looking for ways to express themselves or to, you know, when we talk about women's voice, we're talking about her capacities and her ability to speak up, set boundaries, speak her truths, express herself. And this has become a very big subject in my personal life and the women that I work with, because many women are sort of afraid of their own voices. and afraid of how powerful their voices can be. And I feel really passionate about this work because I feel like women need a lot of support to actually stand up for themselves and use their voices and make their voices heard, because this is not just, you know, our generation, but it comes back in history. Sometimes it's the whole female lineage that we need to address, and all of these women that walked before us and whose voices were suppressed somehow, depending on the circumstances. But, sometimes it feels like we are now at the forefront. So by allowing ourselves to express our voices, we're also doing the work for the women that walked behind us, that walked before us. So I see a lot of meaning in that. Um, so the retreats that I'm curating here in Provence, I think are all around these topics. It's for women who want to walk the path of transformation, walk towards themselves, and through these walks, become closer to their own authentic truth, and
Mhm.
then bring that back with them. So this is where, Michelle, you asked me this question in the beginning. How does transformational travel work when you then come home and realize that, well, everything sort of stayed the same? And even if you feel like you've changed and you had this amazing transformative experience, how do you go about it when you come home? And this is probably the time in the podcast when I want to send a question back to you, since you've just been to Provence and you've experienced many things probably for the first time, and you've also shared it with your mother, which is an unusual experience on its own, because we tend to spend a lot of time with our parents when we're kids, but once we grow older and we have families of our own, then it's not very often that we take trips with our parents. So, how did it feel for you when you got back after that shared experience, but then you got back to your sort of daily life and what you were used to?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, Tatiana. I don't think I've ever had anyone ask me a question on the podcast.
I'm always breaking the rules.
You
Sorry.
are breaking the rules, girl. Um, yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that it was definitely unique in that my mom and I are communicating actually more because we have this common bond and this experience that we had together that we want to kind of keep alive in some ways. I've been sharing pictures with her, like I'll kind of share a picture a day. I'll be like, oh, I remember this, love this moment. And then it'll like remind her of something. And I think she's had a little bit of a dip coming back home, and then she's now spiking again, which I think, we just interviewed Susie Ross, who is helping us understand how transformation isn't linear. You don't
Mm-hmm.
just come home and like all of a sudden feel euphoric for the rest of your life, that there's actually a process. So I think my mom was feeling the feels, but she was so empowered on that walk. I think that is going to be a lifelong ripple because I've also shared with all of her friends that she was able to walk 4 miles. And maybe you could speak to the kind of magic of that walk that you took us on. But she has now been walking,
Mm-hmm.
which she wasn't, so I think that's just huge in itself. Um, but the ripple of us communicating more than we ever have is pretty astounding and pretty beautiful for us. Um, but I knew that that you were going to be able to curate something that was going to be obviously life altering for her. And then it was actually just a byproduct that there was some ripple for her and I. And I think that speaks to the creativity that you have in putting something together, and really listening and the kind of the very strong intuition you have when you're in the process when you talk to myself and my mom initially. um, you took the time to really listen and figure out what was going to work best. And based on, honestly, obviously on my mom's interests and passions, and you took it, you kind of ran and created this beautiful retreat for her. And I envision that that's what, you do when you do, when you're doing it for groups, or for, small groups, whether they're big or small, or for local groups, whatever it is. So I really appreciated that part, because oftentimes you're just kind of going into something that's already existing and it doesn't really match up. So
Yeah.
you put a lot of heart into it.
Well, first of all, it makes me very, very happy that you now have this bond that grew a little bit stronger with your mom.
Mhm.
And this is how we create bonds. This is when actually, if you have children of your own, this is why you want to take them on trips, because what you're doing, you're creating the memories, you're creating these experiences so that it's through shared experience we grow closer. And so this is why I prefer curating retreats for smaller groups, ideally for, couples, two people, three, four max, because this is where you can get really personalized. You can really get to this level of catering for each person's needs.
Mhm.
And so when I was listening to your mom, I knew that in order to create this bond, you would have to engage in certain activities together. So this is why, this is where I like to say that healing can take very different forms.
Mhm.
Sometimes cooking and preparing a meal together can be a healing experience.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's, making art together, in an art studio can uncover certain conversations that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So, it's very difficult to create a bond when you're just sort of sitting in front of each other and doing small talk or like having awkward conversations. We need to create these environments for people to either immerse themselves in something that they enjoy deeply.
Mhm.
And this is where they then sort of, there's no guard, it then makes it much easier to connect on a different level. So this is why it's so important to introduce these other elements like walking in nature or creating artworks together or be it a trip to the sea. So I see this not as a travel or like touristic destinations, but
Mhm.
I always see it as a backdrop or an environment that you
Mhm.
create for this close connection between people. And it makes me even happier to hear that your mom keeps walking. Uh, and maybe this would be interesting to share a little bit of the context that one of the non-negotiables on the itinerary was a walk to Mary Magdalene's Grotto, which has been a place for pilgrimage, especially for women, for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, really. And it's a very special place in a beautiful forest that I call an enchanted forest, and you have to walk through it, and it's a windy road that takes you up, 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 and then you end up in this beautiful grotto that is now made into a church that is literally like a part of the cave. So it is a very special walk, a very special place, and I myself brought my mother there and my sisters there, so I know that it has to be done. And in the beginning, there was a lot of resistance from both Michelle and her mother, because her mother was, obviously not, she was basically not believing. That was the problem. She was not believing herself that she was capable of doing the walk. So I had to play it out a little bit and say, well, I know you don't believe in yourself, but I have to believe in you. So if you trust me, then we're going to make this happen. And this walk will stay in my memory, I hope forever, because it was absolutely incredible. And it was really the heroine's journey, you know, it really was, because the limitations that women have most of the time, and I'm not just speaking about your mother now, the limitations we have about ourselves are almost never physical, they are all in our heads. And so many times we think we're not capable of something, and we tell each other and we tell ourselves the stories that, oh no, we cannot do it. This is unachievable. This is not for me. I've never done this before. And we leave with these stories and we become these stories that we tell ourselves. And so, what your mother experienced is exactly what I call transformation, because transformation can only be felt in your body. You have to experience that. And through walking, through physically walking, through the pain, through like making your body remember how it feels to overcome the fear, to overcome the pain, and to really walk at your own pace, even when if you have to stop, even if you have to lie down, even if you have to cry, even if you have to sing on the way, no matter what it takes, you get there in the end. And there was something very beautiful about the dynamic that we had. So there were three of us, and we're, three women of three different ages, again, three different mindsets, if you like, three different worldviews. But there was something so beautiful in us walking together, that we were there for each other and we could feel it, physically, mentally, spiritually. There was sort of this force taking us up the mountain. And of course, we all had doubts. I mean, your mom definitely wanted to give up a couple of times during the walk. And then at some point, I felt like you also wasn't sure it was a great idea. But just because we kept walking, we kept doing it, just seeing your mom at the top of that mountain, being ecstatic, sort of singing, laughing, lying down, taking a break. That image will stay with me because this is a story of each woman, and that sense of achievement that she's had, physically, something that she's taken away with her from that mountain, something that she can then connect with and remember. This becomes precious. So when we talk about these experiences, there is so much more than just a walk. There is so much more than just a trip. They become, they can become life-changing, and they can create this ripple effects that are lasting. So, I mean, thank you for trusting me with with taking you on this walk. And I did say at the beginning that, I believe that every woman is capable of doing it. And I've seen it multiple times, and I'm sure I will keep seeing it. And it's very inspiring for me as well. Every time I get inspired, and it's empowering, really, to share these journeys.
Yeah, and it was great to collaborate with you too. Um, in that I don't think that would have been anything I would have ever been able to do on my own with her. Like, having you there and to the listener out there, it's not like we just walked straight. We were breaking probably every other couple minutes in order to make it up. And you were able to, even at like one point, we did some kind of guided meditation a little bit through sound, right? My mom and I were humming together with
Mm-hmm.
Tatiana, which was very kind of soothing and calming um, for the both of us. And I think I loved when we came, it was all on an incline on the way up. So obviously we needed to decline coming down, and Tatiana and I just kind of held on to my mom on either side, and the three of us just walked down together the whole time. The whole 2 miles we were just kind of together. And I think that was a pretty beautiful scene too. Um, so yeah, so thank you for holding that space for us. And I know that you do that for so many others as well. And I can only imagine, integrating even more sound, which I know you've done too, since you have that talent. And that, I mean, being in an enchanted forest like that with sound is just, it's like heaven.
My favorite part in all of this is actually, it's very important for me to sort of walk the talk, literally, because we hear this a lot that, women walk together, and when women come together, they can accomplish almost anything. But when you physically walk with other women, there's just so much power and joy in this act of walking. And when you physically get into the circle and you sound together, this is what we experienced last night, for instance. When you have 10 women using their voices in the same room, I mean, the room becomes so resonant and vibrates with such power, then, here is the evidence, So a lot of this stuff sounds good, and we know this in theory, but it's that experiential moments that are so precious. Once you've experienced that, it's real. And I know that our world is becoming more and more digitalized, and there's more and more online. And I love online, don't get me wrong. It really helps you connect with, women around the globe. But I think we need more and more of this presence with each other, creating these spaces where we physically can come together, sing together, walk together, share. This is how we really build the community and support each other. Even if it's temporary, even if it's for a few days, but this coming together, I think it really replenishes you and resources you. And for me, I get asked, but how do you then replenish yourself? But actually, this is this work is very beneficial, it's very rewarding, because there's always an exchange when you work with other women. And
Mhm.
it's like a cycle, it's really that, it's the more you give, the more you receive. When you interact with other women and you share the stories with other women, you also replenish yourself. And this is the beauty in working with women and coming together. I think it's very much needed in the world that we live in.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think um, some of the other elements that you have, given that you are in Provence, is is these other elements of joy. I mean, Provence is known for, I mean, well, it's known for a lot of things, but I mean, but this, between the lavender gardens and the culinary and the art, I mean, there's just so many beautiful things that people can experience beyond the walking, and the sound that you create, that you can bring in to any type of retreat experience. And then, of course, your property that you live on, that people get to stay in, is such a unique, it's not one of those big hotels. Like, you could actually stay in this really beautiful estate, that maybe you could speak to, Tatiana, a little bit, because I think that also creates a totally unique experience that's different.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is my third summer in Provence. I used to live in London before for years. And as I mentioned, I was born in Moscow. So even when I moved to Provence, for me, it was like moving to a different planet, quite frankly, like experiencing and embracing this very different lifestyle, much more sort of the slow living and a different climate, and the French culture and the way the French in the South live their lives. That took a lot of adjustment, let me tell you. When I moved here from London, I was very annoyed and frustrated by the fact that everybody's too slow, too inefficient, and how dare they break for lunch for 2 hours and not work. And now, slowly but surely, this has really grown on me, and I've really embraced this lifestyle, and I really see a lot of meaning behind it. So, in this part of the world, people are living with the cycles of nature. They live very close to the land. They live with the cycles of nature, and they adjust. And this, yes, it makes you slow down a lot, but also it makes you connect and think about what's important and what's really not. So this is what you learn just by living here. And I feel that just living here has really changed me and the way I see the world. And these are the elements that I love to share with people that come and visit. So the property that you've mentioned, this is where I live currently. This is a family-run estate, and the main house is from 18th century. So even, observing how the family has maintained the land, the property, how much love and respect they invest in maintenance of this garden, of the swimming pool, of every plant, and how they're so hands-on, how much they care about the land that they live on. This is inspiring. So when you get to connect with that, you also, it just makes you reflect on certain things and how you are living your life. And then again, the food becomes almost a religious subject when you live in France. Everything is done around a table. There's an art in what you eat, when you eat it, how, and the quality of the ingredients and where they come from. So again, everything has this element of almost a ritual or creative or artistic, starting with where the ingredients come from to how it's presented on the table. So there's also the aesthetic element and the beauty in all of that. So by immersing yourself in this land and the people and the culture, there's also a lot that you learn just by, yeah, again, by experiencing. Yeah, it's you can't read these things in a book. You can watch a YouTube channel about Provence, but it's really when you're here and when you see it for yourself. And this is why I love bringing other people on board. So the experiences that you and your mom had when you met people who live here, you went into their houses, you could meet them, hear their story, and learn from them directly. This also creates a very, very special memory, you know. And of course the beauty, the wine, the lavender, the fact that there's always some sort of flower blossoming here, depending on the month when you come, from tulips to poppy flowers to lavender to sunflowers. It's always colorful, it's the I still, even after 3 years of living here, sometimes I go on a drive and I feel like I need to stop the car just because it's too beautiful. I did that, true story. I would stop the car and come out and take a photo of a sunset in a field. It's just this place is spectacular. Sometimes you do feel like you're living in a film set or a movie, and you need to pinch yourself to be like, this cannot be real. So, yeah, I feel very privileged to live in a place like this. And of course, I feel very inspired to share the love to this place to anybody that comes and visits.
I love this. Well, we need to wrap it up. Tatiana, we're gonna put in the description how to contact you and also like future retreats. I know you have one coming up in October. Is it October? Yeah. Um, and there's some other ones that I think you have kind of in fruition. But this is definitely, I mean, I highly encourage anybody who wants to just curate your own, like your own private one for a group, especially women's groups. This would be definitely the way to go. Um, I kind of envision like small businesses, like bringing their staff or something to like rejuvenate themselves. I don't know. I just to see that for you, but it's definitely a special and unique experience that I hope that everyone would take for themselves because Provence is beautiful, and then you've got Tatiana to help you through that. So thank you so much for coming on today, Tatiana. I'm so grateful to have had the experience myself um, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me, and definitely stay in touch. And I hope you will come back and we'll walk many, many more kilometers
Oh,
together.
yes, we will. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, always.